Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. It's such a pleasure to have you join us today in celebration of National Women's Health Week. Before we dive in, I am delighted to introduce Dr. Kavita Fajist, the Director of the Office of Women's Health, who will share a few words to open our session. Kavita, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Joyce. Good afternoon and welcome again, everyone. I am delighted to open today's program hosted by the FDA's Office of Women's Health in partnership with the FDA's Human Foods Program. There is no better time to talk about nutrition than National Women's Health Week, which really gives us an opportunity to prioritize our overall wellness and reflect on the choices that shape our long-term health. We all navigate grocery store aisles, pick up food packages, and scan the labels, but do we truly understand what we are reading? Today's session is centered on one of the most practical health tools available to every consumer, the food label. Today, our speakers will cover the nuts and bolts of reading the nutrition facts label, from serving sizes to daily values, and shed light on the various nutrition and health claims that appear on food and supplement packaging. And a special highlight will be an overview of FDA's recently updated definition of the healthy nutrient content claim. So whether you are a seasoned label reader or just getting started, we hope that you leave this webinar feeling informed, confident, and ready to put this knowledge to work during your next trip to the grocery store so that you can make more informed decisions in support of your personal health goals. So before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to thank the incredible team we have here at the FDA Office of Women's Health who put this program together. You just met Dr. Joyce Obidi, who led this effort. And I want to extend my gratitude to our colleagues from the Human Foods Program. And thank you all for joining us today. So let's get started. Back to you, Joyce.
Thank you so much, Kavita. What a wonderful way to kick off this afternoon. So before we get started, a few quick housekeeping items. This session is being recorded and will be made available after the event. Today, we have 3 expert presentations lined up for you, followed by a combined Q&A session at the end. We encourage you to submit your questions at any time using the Q&A pod. Our team will be monitoring it throughout. Now, before we begin, I would like to take a moment to introduce all of our wonderful presenters who are all nutritionists in the Division of Nutrition Labeling, Science, and Claims within FDA's Office of Nutrition Labeling. First, we have Crystal Rivers. Crystal will walk us through the nutrition facts label. Next, we have Dr. Fabiana Mora, who will guide us through the different types of nutrition claims that appear on food and dietary supplement labels. And finally, we have Vincent DeJesus and Dr. Sarah Gauber. They will walk us through FDA's newly updated healthy nutrient content claim. Welcome to all of our presenters. We're so glad to have you with us today. Crystal, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Let me just share my slide. Okay. Thank you for that kind introduction. I'm Crystal Rivers. I'm a nutritionist in the Office of Nutrition and Food Labeling. And today I'm going to present to you on understanding the nutrition facts label. For some reason, my slides are not advancing. There we go. So the nutrition facts label is something you're probably familiar with. And here at FDA, we have what's called the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. And that is the portion of the law that gives us authority to regulate foods. The Nutrition Labeling and Education Act was a law that was passed in 1990, and that was done by Congress to help clear up consumer confusion about the food label. It was intended to aid consumers in making healthy food choices, and it was also intended to encourage product innovation by giving manufacturers an incentive to improve the quality of the foods available to consumers. And so this act amended the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act and gave us the authority to require mandatory food labeling. So here is just a schematic of some key dates for the, the history of the nutrition facts label. The nutrition facts label first started appearing on food products in 1994. This was after, extensive rulemaking period to come up with, what it should look like. And then in 2006, we updated it again to add the trans fat declaration that became mandatory. And after that became mandatory, industry largely reformulated their products, and that led to a 80% drop in the declaration of trans fat, or the 80% drop in the amount of trans fat that was consumed. And then in 2016, we did a major revision to the nutrition facts label. That was the first major, kind of refresh since it was first introduced in the early 90s. So this is something you're probably all familiar with. This is the current nutrition facts label, and I intend to go through all of these different components: the serving size, calories, the different nutrients, as well as the percent daily value in the footnote during my presentation. This label is generally found on a variety of different packages. Different packages, boxes, bottles, bags. So here at FDA works to empower consumers by providing nutrition information so that they can create a healthy dietary pattern. And this is really important right now because we are facing an epidemic of diet-related chronic diseases such as cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and obesity. Cardiovascular disease, which consists of coronary heart disease and stroke, and diabetes are among the leading causes of death in women. So it's really important that we provide nutrition information so that consumers can improve their diets to prevent premature death. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the serving size. It's the first line on the nutrition facts label. And this represents the total number of servings in the entire food, or in some cases, it can be also the amount in the entire container. So the serving size is the amount of food that people typically eat at one time. It is not necessarily a recommended amount for you to eat, and you should adjust the amount of food that you eat based on your calorie and nutritional needs. The second thing on the label is calories. And calories, if you recall from the early 90s, previously labels calories was much smaller. So in this, what we see now, calories is given a lot more prominence on the nutrition facts label. A general guide to calories is 2,000 calories per day, but how much a person should consume is going to depend on your age, your weight, your height, and also your physical activity level. The calories are important because they give us fuel. They come from primarily the macronutrients from fat, carbohydrates, and protein, and they really are important for growth and development. So on the label, we have what we call mandatory nutrients. And so for every nutrition facts label, there are certain things that have to be on every food package. And due to space constraints, we can't put everything on every single label. So there's 14 nutrients that are required: total fat, saturated fat, trans fat, cholesterol, sodium, total carbohydrates, dietary fiber, total sugars, which also includes added sugars, and protein, and then 4 vitamins and minerals: vitamin D, calcium, iron, and potassium. So manufacturers can choose to declare other certain vitamins and minerals, as well as things like mono and polyunsaturated fats, and this is done on a voluntary basis. So if a nutrient isn't declared in the nutrition facts label, it doesn't necessarily mean that the food doesn't contain that nutrient. It's just, we have a limited number of space on food packages, and, we can't always include all the nutrients, but, manufacturers can do those on a voluntary basis if they choose. Another key element of the nutrition facts label is the percent daily value, also referred to as the percent DV. And the percent DV describes how much of a nutrient in a serving of food contributes to a total daily diet. It helps you determine if a serving of food is high or low in an individual nutrient. And it's also a useful tool to help you compare one product to another. And a general kind of rule of thumb that we use is that if 5% or less of a nutrient per serving is considered low, so if you're looking, like in this case, this is low in saturated fat, and then 20% or more is considered high. So in this case, added sugars is high. And this is just a general, kind of quick tool you can use to compare products or to help you figure out if you should have a little bit more or a little bit less of this particular nutrient in your diet. But for some nutrients, specifically trans fat, total sugars, and protein, we don't have a percent DV, but these are nevertheless important parts of the label that you should pay attention to. And in this case, since there's no percent DV, you can also use the gram amounts to compare products to one another. So on the label, we have nutrients to get less of, things like saturated fat, trans fat, sodium, and added sugars. Diets high in these nutrients have been linked to some chronic diseases. And again, you can use the label to try and figure out whether you should get more or less of these. So if you strive for getting less than 100% of the DV per day, on most days, then you are on your way to creating a healthier dietary pattern. So saturated fat, which is one of the mandatory nutrients and one of the nutrients you should get less of, it's generally recommended that you should keep that less than 10% of your total daily calories, and that you should focus on incorporating healthy fats from whole foods. So things like avocados or eggs or lean poultry or meats. Also nuts or seeds are also lower in saturated fat. Again, when you're shopping for food to cook at home or when eating out, you should compare and choose foods that throughout the day that's less than 100% of the DV. And you should look for other ways to look for foods that are higher in poly or monounsaturated fats, things like fish or nuts and seeds. So added sugars is another nutrient to limit, and these are sugars that are added during processing or packaged as such. So an example of a package as such is a bag of table sugar. Added sugars also consist of sugars that are added to your diet, such as maple syrup on your pancakes or honey or sugar in your tea or coffee. Another example of added sugars are from concentrated fruit or vegetable juices, often used in things like jams or jellies. Diets high in added sugars can make it difficult for people to meet their daily recommended levels of important nutrients while staying within calorie nutrient limits. For years, there have been recommendations to limit sugars in the diet. In more recent years, recommendations have pointed to limiting sugars that are added. And so when we updated the label in 2016, we included a line for the percent DV of added sugars for the first time. Another place where you can look for information on added sugars, so in addition to using the gram amounts and the percent daily value, you can also look at the ingredient list. And the ingredient lists are going to contain, if a product contains added sugars, will contain ingredients such as high fructose corn syrup, agave syrup, rice syrup, fructose, dextrose. These are some of the examples that you may see in the ingredient list. So it's important to also check out that key element of the food label. Another nutrient to limit is sodium. Most people consume too much sodium in their diet, and diets high in sodium have been linked to high blood pressure, which is a risk factor for cardiovascular disease. And contrary to what most people think, most dietary sodium comes from eating packaged and prepared foods, not from adding sodium to your food at the table. About 40% of the sodium consumed by Americans comes from things like deli meat sandwiches, pizzas, burritos, soups, savory snacks such as chips or crackers. And it also comes from some sources of poultry, as well as pasta and mixed dishes. So for sodium, a lot of products, even within the same category, can vary wildly. So it's really important to look at the label. So even if you're comparing two different bags of chips or two different brands of, so if you're looking at like a frozen entree, the sodium content can vary widely. And that's where the label can be really helpful to help you use to compare, the sodium content from one across of the same product category. So next I'm going to talk about nutrients to get more of. And these are the nutrients that typically most Americans do not get enough of. Dietary fiber, vitamin D, calcium, iron, and potassium. And many of these nutrients are especially important for women, especially iron and calcium. And having a lack of these nutrients in the diet has been linked to certain diseases like osteoporosis or anemia. And so getting enough of these nutrients is really important. So again, you can compare and choose foods to get 100% of the DV of these nutrients on most days. Eating a diet high in dietary fiber from foods such as whole grains or fresh fruits and vegetables is important to maintain your bowels, to lower blood glucose and your cholesterol, and it's also to help reduce calorie intake. And as I mentioned, diets higher in vitamin D, calcium, and iron, and potassium can reduce the risk of developing certain diseases such as osteoporosis, anemia, and as well as high blood pressure. So the nutrition facts label also contains at the very bottom what's called the footnote. And this footnote just gives you a really brief description of the percent daily value. So you don't have to remember that every time you go to the grocery store. So the percent daily value tells you how much of a nutrient in a serving of food contributes to a daily diet. And as I mentioned earlier, 2,000 calories a day is used for general nutrition advice. And so that gives you a starting place. But as I mentioned, how much calories you need is dependent on a number of different factors, such as your age, your height, your physical activity level. And another key component is the ingredient list. So ingredients in the food are going to be listed in a common or usual name, and they are listed in the ingredient list in descending order by weight. So in this example, whole grain is the first ingredient listed. So you know that this product is a whole grain because it is listed first. When it's toward the bottom, then it means that there's less of that particular ingredient in the product. So I mentioned serving size earlier. And so for some products where it can be reasonably consumed at one occasion, like something like a carbonated beverages, where the serving size is typically 12 ounces, but a 20-ounce bottle, most people are going to consume the entire bottle at one occasion. So in this situation, manufacturers are required to use we call it the single serving label, because the calories and other nutrients must be declared for the entire package rather than per serving, because people typically consume that in one sitting. The next example is of a dual column labeling, and this is in situations where it's usually 2 to 3 times what the serving size would be, but in these cases, something like a bag of chips, where you may consume one serving, or for some other people, they may consume the entire container. So nutrition information is presented per serving as well as per package. So I think you need to keep that in mind when you're, thinking about, what are you eating? Are you eating the whole bag, or are you just eating one single serving? And you should also pay attention to what the serving size is. And just lastly, the nutrition education resources, FDA's spent a lot of time putting together a lot of wonderful nutrition education materials. So if you need more information about the nutrition label, that information is on our website and you are free to go visit there. There's a lot of good information for different audiences, for older adults, for children. There's some fun games that can be used by different age groups. So that concludes my presentation, and now I will turn it over to Dr. Fabiana Mora, who's going to talk to you about label claims.
Thank you, Crystal. I hope you can hear me. I'm just putting my slides up. Can you hear me? Just double checking.
Looks and sounds good.
Great, thank you. So this part of the presentation, I'm going to talk about nutrition claims on food and supplement labels. So with the passing of the Nutrition Labeling and Education Act, commonly known as NLEA in 1990, that was the first time that Congress gave formally authority to FDA to regulate nutrition claims on food and supplements. And that's to make sure that consumers receive trustful, science-based, and meaningful information on the label. So here are some types of the nutrition claims that you can see on labels. We have health claims. Those can be authorized, and sometimes we call them SSA, which stands for Significant Scientific Agreement claims, and I'll go over that. What does that mean? And qualified health claims. Then there is also the FDAMA claims. FDAMA is standing for the FDA Modernization Act of 1997, nutrient content claims, and structure function claims. So let's start with the health claims. So health claims are defined in our regulation as an express or implied statement in food labeling about the relationship of a substance to a disease or health-related condition. So also substance is defined as a specific food or food component and a disease. So it's not just any claim on the label about health. It requires pre-market review by FDA, and I'll show like an example of one of our reviews, and can be used on conventional food as well as dietary supplement labels. So as I mentioned before, there are two types of health claims. I will start with the authorized health claims. So I'll read from this because this is the basis for the authorized health claim. To be approved by FDA as an authorized health claim, there must be significant scientific agreement among qualified experts that the claim is supported by the totality of publicly available scientific evidence for the substance-disease relationship for this health claim. So this, what we call the SSA standard, this SSA standard is intended to be a strong statement that provides a high level of confidence in the validity of the substance-disease relationship. So what does that mean? It doesn't need to be consensus among experts, but almost at the level of consensus, where there's like strong scientific agreement among those experts that there is a relationship between the substance and disease. So an example of this, of an authorized health claim that was authorized by FDA, it's the relationship between calcium, vitamin D, and osteoporosis. So adequate calcium and vitamin D throughout life as a part of a well-balanced diet may reduce the risk of osteoporosis. So this is an authorized health claim. So another type of health claim, it's qualified health claim. So qualified health claim, they are also based on the scientific evidence that's reviewed by the FDA, that's credible, but it does not meet the SSA standard. So what means is that even if there is like emerging scientific evidence that we can see that we can include a qualifying language to prevent consumers from being misled or any misleading of the level of the scientific support. If that's can cover that, then we consider to have a qualified health claim. So an example of qualifying language would be limited evidence. So we would have a health claim, but then would say that FDA has found that there is limited scientific evidence, or the evidence is supportive but not conclusive regarding the substance disease relationship. And with qualified health claims, we then issued through a letter of enforcement discretion. And so here I'm going to give you an example of qualified health claim that we just announced in 2020. It's for cranberry and recurrent urinary tract infection, UTI, in healthy women. So FDA received a health claim petition. So we received petitions for health claims requesting that the agency authorize a health claim regarding the relationship between consumption of cranberry products and reduced risk of recurrent UTI in healthy women. So when we received this application, as you can see, the petitioner was asking for authorized health claim. But after a thorough scientific review, we identified that we could only issue an enforcement discretion for a qualified health claim. And even though the petition asked for several cranberry products, we were only able to find studies on cranberry juice beverages and cranberry dietary supplements. So were able to, after the evaluation, to provide model claims for cranberry juice and dietary supplements. So here on this image, you can see like a constituent update. That's when we announce the qualified health claims. And if you can see in the letter, I don't know, it's kind of tiny, but we can see that there is a letter of enforcement discretion link. So if you click on that link, that's where you can see everything that we received, the background information of what the petitioner submitted, the dates that the petitioner submitted to us, the information. So what was the substance they were requesting a health claim and the disease, because in our regulations, the submitters needs to provide a specific substance and a specific disease. And it also provides our full evaluation of the studies. So the petitioner, it has sent to us the information on substance, disease, and articles, but we are also doing our own internal evaluation, our own literature search for those scientific evidence, scientific articles. So we include in the enforcement discretion letter the studies that we considered, the studies that we excluded. So for example, for cranberry juice, if there was one study that was a mix of cranberry juice and lingonberry juice, so in that case, we eliminate the study because we wouldn't be able to see the independent effect of cranberry only on urinary tract infection. So all of that is included in this enforcement discretion letter. So the letter is quite lengthy because it includes all our evaluation, also includes what's the minimum effective dose for the claim. So what's the minimum amount to have to see an effect, and also the food products that are eligible for the claim. So next slide, it's an example of a model qualified claim for cranberry juice. So as you can see, here we have that consuming one serving like 8 ounces each day of cranberry juice beverage may help reduce the risk of recurrent urinary tract infection, UTI, in healthy women. And in blue is the qualifying language. FDA has concluded that the scientific evidence supporting this claim is limited and inconsistent. And the reason why, and we explain in the letter why it's limited and inconsistent, it's because for this study, we only had like 5 randomized controlled trials. Those are the gold standard studies, intervention study designs, and 2 showed benefit, 2 had a beneficial effect, 2 studies showed no effect, and 1 was mixed effect. So it was inconsistent. But again, we looked at every single study, and it's not about just the numbers of the studies, because each study will have the sample size. So they vary about how many individuals were in that study. So that's a factor. The dose is also another factor that we take into account. So there are many factors that we evaluate in each single study that we include, that we could draw scientific conclusions from. So regarding the cranberry dietary supplements, so consuming, after review the evidence, we concluded that consuming 500 milligrams each day of cranberry dietary supplement may help reduce risk of recurrent urinary tract infection in healthy women. FDA has concluded that there is limited scientific evidence supporting this claim. So for this claim, we could draw conclusions from 3 scientific studies, and they all showed beneficial effects. So for that, we don't say it's inconsistent, because it's not inconsistent, but it's still, there was like limited scientific evidence. And that's where we do all those reviews to make sure that the health claim really shows what the scientific evidence there is for the substance disease relationship. So another type of claims is FDAMA claims, and that's when the FDA Modernization Act of 1997, trying to streamline this process, this pathway, has authorized then, based on current published authoritative statements from certain federal scientific bodies, for example, the National Institutes of Health, or Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or the National Academy of Sciences, allowed that manufacturers can send notification to us, providing these authoritative statements, for example, on health claims. And here's an example of a FDAMA health claim that shows that dietaries containing food that are good sources of potassium and low in sodium may reduce the risk of high blood pressure and stroke. So this was an authoritative statement published in the Diet and Health Report at the National Academy of Sciences. So once the manufacturer sent us this notification about this authoritative statement, FDA has 120 days to either prohibit it or modify the claim. And we review, and if we haven't not either modified or prohibited, then the manufacturer can use the claim on food labels. So now we're in the nutrient content claims. Nutrient content claims is defined in our regulations as a claim on the label or in labeling of foods that expressly or implicitly characterize the level of a nutrient in the food. They can be expressed, make the direct statement on the food, or implied. And I'll show examples of those. As I mentioned, they are defined, the levels are defined by our regulation. So expressed nutrient content claims. So absolute claims, they describe the level of a nutrient in the food. So here on the left side, you can see the claims, free, low, good source, excellent source. And what does that mean? So here are the definitions of the levels on our regulations. And before I move forward, I would like just to touch base on this RAC, that it's in here, RAC means reference amount customarily consumed. So in other words, it's the most commonly consumed amount per eating occasion. So just as an example, if we have a vegetable juice, so the RAC for a vegetable juice, look, per eating occasion, the amount consumed, customarily consumed is 8 fluid ounces. So if you look at low claim, if you look at sodium, if the content of sodium in this vegetable juice is 140 milligrams or less per RAC, per this 8 fluid ounces, then the food package can contain the low sodium claim. So now let's look at the good source. And here's a picture of the good source of calcium. You know, some of the nutrients, as Crystal mentioned, that we want to get more of. So if there is a good source, that means that the calcium content of that product is between 10 to 19% of the daily value per RAC of that product. And also just to clarify that the RAC amount, this amount customarily consumed, they are set by the FDA. We have tables providing for this food product, the RAC for food products that manufacturers can go and look for what's the RAC for their product. And then if there is more than 20% or more of the daily value per RAC, it's called the excellent source of the nutrient. We also have like relative claims. That's when we compare that food product with another food product. Usually, sometimes is with the own companies. They can look at their product. We have a product now that's reduced, like for example, in fat or sodium, and to have that claim as reduced, it has to be at least 25% reduction for the nutrient per RAC. And if there is more, it's at least 10% or more of the daily value of the nutrient per RAC for that food, compared to a food, appropriate food reference. Another thing also to mention here is that the reference food also needs to be included on the label. So the type of food that they are comparing to has to be identified as part of the accompanying information for the reduced and more. And now you can observe those in the package labels and make those comparisons. And there is also light. That's another relative claim. And there is also several definitions. So at least a 50% reduction in fat, or 1/3 reduction in calories, or 50% reduction in sodium to bear the light nutrient content claim. So those are the expressed claims, nutrient claims. In terms of implied nutrient claims, it's a claim that suggests that the nutrient is present or absent in a certain amount. So for example, contains no oil, that could be implied as being fat-free. And healthy is an implied content claim that suggests that the food, because of this nutrient content, may be useful in maintaining healthy dietary practices. So we have updated the criteria for healthy, and this is what our colleagues, Vincent De Jesus and Sarah Gebauer, will be talking about next. So, and lastly is the new structure function claims. So structure function claims may describe the role of a nutrient or dietary ingredient intended to affect the normal structure or maintain a function of the human body. For example, calcium builds strong bones, fiber maintains bowel regularity. And you can see that there is no mention of a disease. So there is no mention about disease, like explicitly or implied. So for structure function claims, FDA is not required to do a pre-market review. However, the structure function claims still must be truthful and not misleading. And for dietary supplements, manufacturers must notify these claims to FDA within 30 days after marketing those claims in their products. And in addition, dietary supplements also must include a disclaimer that states FDA has not evaluated the claim and the supplement is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. So if you want to know more about nutrition claims, here's our website. And I also have included links for each of the claims that I presented here and that you can look for more information. Thank you for your time. I'll pass now to Vinny and Sarah. Thank you.
Okay, great. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and thanks for having us here today. Dr. Gebauer and I will be providing information today on the recent updates to the healthy nutrient content claim. Next slide. So you've already heard quite a bit today about FDA's role in nutrition. To echo that information a little, our goal is to ensure people in the United States have greater access to healthier foods and nutrition information. We work to create a healthier food supply and help consumers make healthier food choices. Some of the ways we do this is through information on food labels, such as the nutrient content claims and health claims Fabiana had discussed earlier. And healthy is an example of a nutrient content claim. Next slide. The healthy nutrient content claim is a voluntary claim, meaning manufacturers can choose to use the claim if they want. We established this claim over 30 years ago in 1994 with the goal of providing information to consumers to indicate that a food's nutrient content is useful in building a diet consistent with dietary recommendations. Manufacturers can choose to use the healthy claim on their products if the products meet certain nutrient criteria. Under the original criteria for the claim, products could not exceed certain amounts of nutrients such as total fat, saturated fat, sodium, and dietary cholesterol. And products also had to contain at least 10% of the daily value for a beneficial nutrient, either vitamins A or C, calcium, iron, protein, or fiber. However, nutrition science and dietary recommendations have, evolved since the early 1990s, and the original criteria were no longer consistent with the current nutrition science or federal dietary recommendations, and also not consistent with the updated nutrition facts label. Under the original criteria, the healthy claim could appear on products, as you see on this slide, like sugary cereals and yogurts, as well as white bread that didn't contain any whole grains. Next slide. So we published a proposal for updating the healthy claim a few years ago in 2022. We received more than 400 public comments to that proposed rule, many with very detailed feedback on the proposed updates to the definition. 2 years later, in December 2024, we published the final rule for the updated definition. And the final rule had an effective date of April 2025 and a compliance date of February 2028. Which gives manufacturers time to transition to the new updated requirements of the healthy claim. Next slide. Some of the overarching feedback in the comments to the proposed rule included, general support for updating the claim and for the proposed new approach. However, many of the comments suggested that the specific criteria in the proposed rule were really complicated and a little bit too restrictive. So we conducted a review of the marketplace and the foods in the marketplace to support our consideration of all of these comments and help us determine what foods would meet the criteria that we had proposed, and also what foods would meet other alternative criteria. And based on the comments that we received and our review, we made changes to the final rule to streamline the requirements, make them less complicated, and allow some flexibility while still aligning with current dietary recommendations. Next slide. The updates to the definition establish a new framework for the healthy claim. It uses a food group-based approach along with nutrients to limit. A product now would need to contain a meaningful amount of at least one food group, either vegetables, fruits, grains, dairy, or protein. We call this amount the food group equivalent, or FGE. And the food also not exceed certain limits for saturated fat, sodium, and added sugars in order to bear the healthy claim. The new emphasis on food groups, better reflects the overall nutrient levels of foods to ensure that the foods that bear the healthy claim help consumers maintain these healthy dietary practices. Next slide. So here's just an overview of the updated criteria for the claim that we'll be discussing in the next few slides. We see products with small reference amounts customarily consumed, single ingredient foods exemptions, criteria for the food group equivalents, the FGEs, and nutrients to limit, and also a little bit about water, tea, and coffee. Next slide. So an issue we addressed in the final rule was related to foods of small size. As Fabiana touched on earlier, reference amount customarily consumed, or RACs, are the basis for establishing serving sizes for foods. Comments to the proposed rule noted that some foods with small RACs could not meet the minimum food group equivalent amounts because of their small size, even if these foods contributed to healthy dietary practices and patterns. So to address this, we determined that for foods with RACs less than 50 grams, or 3 tablespoons in size, the food group equivalent and nutrients to limit criteria are to be calculated on a 50-gram basis rather than their actual rack size. The 50-gram basis brings these foods more in line with sizes of other individual foods. And on this slide, you also see an example of one of these foods with small racks, which would be sort of a salsa that has a lot of vegetables, tomatoes, and things like that. Next slide. Okay. In the proposal, we had provided an exemption for raw whole fruits and vegetables, meaning these foods would automatically qualify without having to meet food group equivalent and nutrient to limit criteria. In the final rule, we expanded this exemption to all single ingredient foods and food groups encouraged by the dietary guidelines with no additional ingredients other than water. These foods now would automatically qualify without having to meet the FGE or nutrients to limit criteria. Examples that you'll see on this slide of these types of foods would include whole or sliced fruits, unsalted nuts, brown rice, or frozen mixed vegetables. This expansion of the exemption simplifies compliance for industry, as manufacturers would not have to evaluate these basic foods against the FGE or the nutrients to limit criteria. And now I will be turning things over to Sarah to continue the discussion. Thanks.
Thanks, Vincent. So let's dive into the updated criteria a little more. This table shows a more detailed look at the requirements for individual foods. Individual foods are foods that are predominantly made up of one food group. And we've thrown a lot of nutrition information at you today, so we're not going to go over all these values, but we'll just provide some examples over the next few slides. So looking at the table, in the first column, we have the different recommended food groups and subgroups. So we have grains, dairy, fruits and vegetables, the different types of subgroups from the protein food group that are regulated by FDA, including game meat, seafood, eggs, beans, peas, and lentils, nuts, seeds, and soy products, and at the bottom, oils and oil-based dressings and spreads. The second column has the minimum food group amounts that Vincent mentioned that are required for the healthy claim, and we refer to those again as food group equivalents or FGEs, and those amounts are in cup or ounce equivalents. And the remaining columns are the maximum amounts for the nutrients to limit, saturated fat, sodium, and added sugars. And those limits are based on the percent of the daily value, or DV, which Crystal explained earlier. And both of these, the requirements for the food group amounts and the nutrients to limit, are per reference amount customarily consumed, or RAC, which Fabiana and Vincent already mentioned, are used to determine serving sizes. So let's take a look at an example, looking at the vegetable food group. If you had a vegetable product like a frozen vegetable blend with seasoning or a little sauce, it would need to contain a minimum of a half a cup of vegetables and contain no more than 5% of the daily value for saturated fat, which is 1 gram, no more than 10% of the daily value for sodium, which is 230 milligrams, and no more than 2% of the daily value for added sugars, which is 1 gram. And as a consumer, you don't have to know all of these criteria. A product that is using the healthy nutrient content claim would have to contain that minimum food group amount and also not exceed the limits for saturated fat, sodium, and added sugars for the specific food group that the product falls under in order to use the claim. And again, these are the criteria for individual foods, which are those foods that are predominantly made up of one food group. There are also criteria for foods that contain meaningful amounts of more than one food group, and we refer to these types of products as combination foods. Combination foods includes mixed products, main dishes, and meals. So mixed products are foods that contain a meaningful amount of more than one food group, but are not considered a main dish or a meal. So for example, a trail mix that contains some nuts and dried fruit could be a mixed product example. A main dish is something like an entree or main component of a meal, and then a meal product is intended to serve as the entire meal. The criteria for the combination foods follow a stepwise approach, increasing as you increase in size from mixed products to main dishes to meals. For example, looking at the minimum food group amounts that are required, mixed products have to contain a minimum of one total food group equivalent, or FGE, coming from at least 2 different food groups. Main dishes have to contain a minimum of 2 total food group equivalents, and meals have to contain a minimum of 3 total food group equivalents. The limits for saturated fat, sodium, and added sugars also follow a stepwise approach. And looking at saturated fat, just as an example, the limit is 10% of the daily value for mixed products, 15% of the daily value for main dishes, and 20% of the daily value for meals. So for example, if you're in the grocery store, you're walking down the freezer aisle and you see a veggie lasagna product that has whole grains and it has the healthy claim on its packaging, what would that mean? So this type of product would likely fall under the main dish category. So if it has the healthy claim on its packaging, it would mean that it contains at least 2 total food group equivalents that could be coming from the whole grains and from the vegetables, for example, and would also mean that it contains no more than 3 grams of saturated fat, no more than 460 milligrams of sodium, and no more than 7.5 grams of added sugars. Looking at a few other examples, we have yogurt as an example of an individual food, trail mix, again, as an example of a mixed product, and a frozen salmon dinner as an example of a meal. So for each of these, the product would need to meet the minimum food group amounts and the limits for saturated fat, sodium, and added sugars. So for the yogurt as an individual food, it would need to contain a minimum of 1 food group equivalent of dairy, or 2/3 cup of yogurt, and meet the nutrient to limit amounts for the dairy food group. No more than 2 grams of saturated fat, no more than 230 milligrams of sodium, and no more than 2.5 grams of added sugars. Looking at the trail mix as an example of a mixed product, it would need to contain 1 total food group equivalent coming from 2 different food groups. So for example, at least 1/8 cup of dried fruit and at least 1/4 ounce of nuts, and then also contain less than the limits for saturated fat, sodium, and added sugars for a mixed product shown on the bottom row there. And finally, for the frozen salmon dinner as an example of a meal, it would need to contain 3 total food group equivalents. For example, at least 1 ounce of salmon, at least 1/2 cup of green beans, and at least 3/4 ounce of brown rice, and meet those nutrient to limit requirements for a meal product. No more than 4 grams of saturated fat, no more than 690 milligrams of sodium, and no more than 10 grams of added sugars. And again, as a consumer, you don't have to know all these criteria. Manufacturers have to make sure that these requirements are met in order to use the healthy nutrient content claim. There are a few products that can automatically qualify to use the claim without having to meet those food group or nutrients to limit criteria. Vincent already mentioned one example with the single ingredient foods exemption. Other examples are water, including carbonated water with less than 5 calories per serving, and coffee and tea with less than 5 calories per serving. And the less than 5 calories per serving amount is consistent with our regulations for the definition of calorie-free. So these types of beverages could automatically qualify. And here are just some examples of foods that could qualify under the updated criteria. We have examples like fruits and vegetables that will continue to qualify. This includes different forms of fruits and vegetables, such as frozen, chopped, and dried. And then we have examples like eggs, salmon, and water, which could not use the claim previously under the original criteria, but will be able to now under the updated criteria. And thinking back to the examples of products that Vincent mentioned earlier that could qualify under the original criteria, as well as some additional examples that you can see there shown on the left, you can see things like sugary yogurts and cereals, sugary snacks and juices, and white bread without any whole grains. And these are also examples of highly processed foods. Most of these types of highly processed foods will not be able to qualify for the updated claim because they tend to be higher in sodium, added sugars, and saturated fat. And they would also have to meet that minimum food group amount to qualify. And these types of highly processed foods tend to not contain meaningful amounts of different food groups. In comparison, looking at the examples of foods that qualify for the updated claim on the right, which we saw on the previous slide, these are foods that can be particularly useful in helping you build a healthier dietary pattern because of the nutrients that they contain. And when you're purchasing food, for example, when you're in the grocery store aisle, you're trying to decide what to buy, having the healthy claim on a product can act as a quick signal to help you easily identify healthier food choices. And I will wrap up with just mentioning that we have more information about the updated healthy claim up on our website, which is shown at the bottom of the slide here. And we also have different materials and resources up on our website, including infographics and fact sheets about the updated healthy claim, like those shown on the left, if you are interested in checking those out. And with that, I will pass it back over to Joyce. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. That was amazing and very informative. We're now going to open the floor for our Q&A session. So we'll have all of our presenters with us. So please direct your questions to any of them. So the first question that we have here, this is for Fabiana. How is an authorized health claim different than a qualified health claim? Fabiana, you're on mute. Okay, so it looks like we're having some technical difficulties. So I'm going to move to our next question. So this is for Vinny and Sarah. Can you walk us through a real world example of a food that qualifies under the new criteria, but would not have qualified under the original 1994 criteria?
Sure, I can answer this one. As you saw in one of Sarah's slides, there are a number of examples of foods that can qualify for use of the claim based on the new updated requirements compared to the original requirements from 1994. Foods such as eggs, olive oil, salmon, like you saw in the pictures. The old criteria prevented foods like eggs from bearing the healthy claim due to the cholesterol limits that were in the definition. I had put up the old criteria in one of my earlier slides, and you saw that there was a cholesterol criteria that's no longer included in the updated criteria. Salmon and other fish were ineligible to bear the claim due to the total fat limits in the old definition. There were, again, there was a criteria in the old definition for total fat. The new criteria only has saturated fat, sodium, and added sugars. Similarly, the total fat limit, as well as the requirements for the beneficial nutrients, prevented oils like olive oil from bearing the claim. The updated criteria, don't include the cholesterol total fat criteria, but only the three ones that I had mentioned: the saturated fat, sodium, and added sugars, and plus the new FGE criteria, because the new criteria are focused on food groups instead of the individual beneficial nutrients. As a result, the healthful foods such as these that I mentioned, the eggs, olive oil, and salmon, are now able to bear the healthy claim when they couldn't before. Thanks.
Thanks, Vincent. So Fabiana is back. So I'm going to go back to her question. So Fabiana, this is for you. How is an authorized health claim different than a qualified health claim?
Yes, thank you for the question. So as I showed earlier, an authorized health claim, it's based on a stronger evidence. So when we we do our scientific evaluation, if we see that there is like inconsistencies with the scientific evidence or limitation in the number of studies or the quality or anything that we see during our evaluation, that's when we provide that qualifying language that will reflect the current science, the scientific evidence for that substance and disease relationship. And that is then included in the claim so that consumers will know what the level of the scientific evidence it is for that claim. I hope that clarifies.
Thanks, Fabiana. That's perfect. So this next question, this is for you, Crystal. Are bilingual nutrition fact labels allowed?
Sorry, thanks for bearing with us. We're having some technical issues. Yes, they are allowed to have more than one language on the nutrition facts label, but all information has to be presented in English.
Perfect. All right. Let's see. All right, Fabiana, this question's for you again. Are the cranberry dietary supplements that carry the UTI related qualified health claims safe to take alongside prescription medications?
Yeah, no, that's another great question. So when we review do our evaluation for health claims, I want to also mention that we do have a section on safety, but that's about the safety of the product that we're evaluating. So in that case, in the enforcement discretion letter, you're going to see our safety evaluation for cranberry juice and cranberry dietary supplements. However, we do not, when we're evaluating health claims, we do not look into interactions with other drugs or any other interactions. So for that, the consumers will need to reach out to their doctors and seek out more information, which is related to their case, their specific case, which types of drugs that they are taking. But health claims are about that substance and the disease that we're evaluating. I hope that's also clear. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, our next question. So this is for Vincent or Sarah. Why was the single ingredient foods exemption expanded beyond just raw whole fruits and vegetables?
Sure, I can take that one. So as Vincent mentioned during his presentation, in the proposed rule, we propose that raw whole fruits and vegetables could automatically qualify to use the claim. And we received public comments to the proposed rule saying that other forms of fruits and vegetables, such as frozen fruits and vegetables and chopped fruits and vegetables, for example, when you're in the produce section of the grocery store and you see cantaloupe that's cut up and packaged, foods like that should automatically qualify as well. Comments also brought up nutrient-dense foods and other food groups that are encouraged by the dietary guidelines and do not have any added ingredients. So foods like plain brown rice or dried beans, unsalted nuts and frozen fish, to name a few examples. Comments were requesting that these types of foods should also automatically qualify as well. And we agreed that it's not necessary for these types of foods to meet additional criteria because they are nutrient-dense foods that are encouraged by the dietary guidelines that can help consumers by serving as a foundation for a healthy dietary pattern. So we expanded the exemption, as we mentioned, in the final rule to include nutrient-dense foods that are encouraged by the dietary guidelines across different food groups and different forms of foods if they do not contain any added ingredients besides water.
Thank you, Sarah. All right, we have some more questions here. So for Crystal, are fresh fruits and vegetables required to have a nutrition facts label?
So fresh fruits and vegetables are not required to have a nutrition facts level. The labeling of fresh fruits and vegetables is voluntary. And so a lot of times what you see is in the grocery store, that information will be provided in like a poster, or it can be provided on like a shelf tag that's in close proximity to the food. It's kind of hard to label fresh produce with a label, just by the nature of what they are. But a lot of times that information is available even though it is voluntary.
Fantastic. So Fabiana, this next one is for you. When a product says excellent source of calcium and vitamin D, does that mean it can prevent osteoporosis?
So, no, because as you might have noticed, some health claim, we do have the word may reduce the risk. So when I was showing the vitamin D, calcium, vitamin D, and osteoporosis, it says that the adequate intake of calcium, vitamin D within a well-balanced, healthy diet, then may reduce the risk of osteoporosis. And that it's because diseases involve, like, there are many factors for disease. So it's not just intake of calcium and vitamin D.
Perfect. Thank you, Fabiana. All right, this next one is for Vincent and Sarah. How should consumers interpret the healthy claim when they see it on a food label going forward?
So consumers should understand that healthy diets are made up of a variety of food groups and nutrients, and the healthy claim can help consumers identify those foods that are the foundations of healthy dietary patterns. Because of the required FGE amounts and the limits on amounts of certain nutrients like saturated fat, sodium, and added sugars, the healthy claim can help consumers identify healthier food choices at a quick glance when choosing the foods to purchase.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Some more questions coming in. So for Crystal, if a nutrient is not declared on the label, does that mean the food does not contain that nutrient?
So as I mentioned during the presentation, some nutrients are voluntary. So it doesn't mean that say for example, if, you look at a label and it doesn't have a nutrient that's voluntary, it doesn't mean that the food doesn't necessarily have that nutrient. It's just we only require certain nutrients to be mandatory. And that's for a number of reasons. One is the space constraints, and two, it's also the cost to put together these labels. They do add to the economic cost. We do have to take into account the economic costs when we do these rules.
Thank you, Crystal. Fabiana, Are qualified health claims allowed on all food categories, or are there restrictions on which types of foods or dietary supplements can carry them?
Yes, so there is like a disqualifying level of nutrients when we look at which types of food products. So that's defined by regulation. So levels above a certain level for, let's say, saturated fat, cholesterol, sodium. So those foods would be disqualified for bearing a health claim.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. So for Sarah and Vinny, what was the main driver behind FDA's decision to update the healthy claim after more than 30 years?
Sure, and Vinny touched on this a little bit, but nutrition science has evolved since the 1990s when the criteria for the healthy nutrient content claim were first established. And the reason for updating the healthy claim was really to be consistent with current nutrition science and federal dietary guidance, and also to be consistent with the updated nutrition facts label. And I can just give a couple examples of changes that were made to align with current nutrition science and dietary guidelines. So advancements in nutrition science have provided a greater understanding of the importance of healthy dietary patterns and the food groups that make up those patterns, and also how different nutrients in foods can act together synergistically to benefit health. So using food groups in the criteria rather than just individual nutrients is more consistent with current nutrition science, which emphasizes these healthful dietary patterns. And just one other example, limiting added sugars in the diet aligns with current nutrition science and the dietary guidelines for Americans, as well as the updated nutrition facts label, which now includes the declaration of added sugars, as Crystal mentioned. So the original criteria for the healthy claim did not include a limit for added sugars, whereas the updated criteria, as we've mentioned, does include an added sugars limit. So those are just a couple examples to show why it was important to update the healthy claim in order to be consistent with current nutrition science and dietary recommendations.
Thank you. So Fabiana, what are some examples of cranberry containing foods that women could eat that may reduce the risk of recurrent UTIs in women?
Yes. So the ones that we evaluated, as I explained, even though the petition submitted for all kinds of cranberry products, we could only evaluate those that were available on had scientific evidence, was cranberry juice and cranberry dietary supplements. And we even include in the health claim like the minimum effective dose, so that consumers would know that at that dose, at least having, for example, 8 ounces of cranberry juice per day or 500 milligrams per day of the dietary supplement, then that would may have, the reduced risk of UTI, recurrent UTI.
So this is for Vinny and Sarah. What should food manufacturers be doing right now to prepare for the February 2028 compliance date?
Sure. How manufacturers should prepare will really depend on how individual manufacturers are using the healthy claim now and their intentions for using their claim in the future. For example, if a manufacturer is currently using the claim on their foods and they intend to continue using the claim, then the manufacturer would need to evaluate if those foods meet the updated criteria. Modifications to ingredients, formulations, or recipes may be needed for some foods to make sure that they meet the updated requirements. Other manufacturers, might not be currently using the claim, but may decide to, if based on the updated criteria, their foods could potentially qualify for use of the claim. So, essentially, each manufacturer will need to look at both their existing foods and their potential food products and determine if use of the claim is possible.
Thanks, Vinny. So we have another question for Fabiana. Does FDA have to review each nutrient content claim before it is used on every product label?
No. So once we authorized a nutrient content claim, that can be used in any products that meet the requirements. But also, I want to say, even with health claim petitions, once, because we evaluated the substance and disease and not a brand from a specific manufacturer. So once that health claim has been authorized, or we exercise enforcement discretion for qualified health claims, those can be used on food products that are eligible, and the eligibility is described in the for qualified health claims in the enforcement discretion letter.
All right. So we have another question. Fabiana, I think this is for you again. Is there a published list of FDA MA diet and health statements that have been reviewed by FDA?
So yes, so the links that I provided on my slides, and I believe is also shared here in the Q&A. So over there, you can see all the claims that we have authorized, or we have enforcement discretion. You can find those enforcement discretion letters. I didn't mention it during my talk, but the ones that we received petition and we denied, we also have the letters with the denial, so explaining why we denied those requests for claims. And so, yeah, you can find all of those in our website.
Okay, so we have some more questions coming in. How does FDA assess what the average person consumes in one serving? That's for anyone.
So can you repeat the question again? Sorry, we're having to switch back and forth here.
Yeah, sorry, give me 1 second. I just lost that question. So, I think it was, okay, how does FDA assess what the average person consumes in one serving?
So that's a good question, but it's a complicated one to try and answer. So when we updated the serving sizes, or what's called the reference amount customarily consumed, which you've heard about from Fabiana and Sarah, we looked at food composition data from the U.S. population, and then from there we looked at, what is the median. So for labeling, we can only pick one value to kind of serve as a reference point. And then those racks are then used by the manufacturer to determine what the serving size would be on their food packages. And so I gave a couple of examples of, so for example, like the rack for a soda or a carbonated beverage is 12 ounces, but the serving size for a 20-ounce bottle is going to be one bottle. So the rack is the starting point for calculating the serving size on the package, but how those serving sizes are calculated, I mean, it is defined in regulation. And if you really wanted more technical information about how we come up with those numbers, then we can put the link to the final rule in the chat. But, in general, it's just based on, food consumption data about what people are likely to consume.
Thank you. And then I'm going to wrap up our Q&A session. This is our last question. So why not incentivize food producers to offer only healthy foods?
I can start, and Vinny, also feel free to jump in. The updated healthy nutrient content claim can really provide accurate information to help consumers identify those healthier food choices and those foods that can be particularly useful in building a healthy dietary pattern. They can also, or having the updated claim can also incentivize food manufacturers and industry to make healthier foods in order to meet the updated criteria. And that was one goal with the updated criteria, and making it consistent with current nutrition science and current dietary guidance, that it would also help incentivize food manufacturers to make healthier foods in order to meet that updated criteria.
Thanks, Sarah. So I think that's a wonderful way to wrap things up. So on behalf of FDA's Office of Women's Health and the Human Foods Program, a heartfelt thank you to all of our presenters, Crystal, Fabiana, Vincent, and Sarah. Thank you so much for your time today. And thank you all for joining us for National Women's Health Week. The recording and all of our resources are available on our website. And also on our website, please visit our National Women's Health Week blog. There's some wonderful information there. Have a wonderful afternoon, everyone. Thank you.